Now, while it is true, as we said multiple times, that it's not that it matters too much how well each individual spec is doing right now in the midnight beta, since we are 3 months away from the expansion, so it's not that worrying for example, bad specs or that promising for good specs. If you go and start looking at, rankings of results, possibly even just DPS results in keys right now in the beta to see who is doing well, because it might just be a matter of numbers, right? Very simple tuning could fix this. However, what is interesting is that right now there has been quite the disparity when it comes to tanks. We have touched on this already when we were going through tanks for Warrior, for example, pointing out the state of Proc Warrior. And right now, amongst tanks at the moment, you have a clear, huge outlier, which is Blood Death Knight. Blood Death Knight right now is doing extremely well, and it does have some of the old tools which allowed the one time, pretty much, which allowed Blood DK to become the meta tank. Because if we go and start taking trips down memory lane, you take this expansion, you take the War Within, and Blood is nowhere to be seen. Like, the entire expansion, just zero. It didn't help that the red in the DPS spot was the meta one for the entire expansion, but then you go back to Dragonflight, there hasn't really been a lot of red in the DPS category in Dragonflight, and there was still really no Blood DK. Even if we go even further beyond that, like BFA for example, it's not that Blood DK was having too good of a time. The only one time Blood DK was meta was in our very first Exodia comp in Season 3 of Shadowlands with Holy Priest, Destro and Survival, and lasted for a couple of seasons. That was the one time. The one time was what allowed Blood to be meta, was the help in getting some form of damage reduction. One of the problems of Blood is that they keep chilling in 10s and 12s and 14s. Many tanks enjoy Blood because they are the one-man army that doesn't need any help, they do everything themselves, until inevitably they reach a key high enough where the solution to all the problems, I will just heal it myself, Lamau, doesn't work anymore, because you're taking just too much damage to just have the time to heal yourself back up. The strongest thing you can get to solve that issue is flat DR. Back in Shadowlands it was a tier set, giving you a much increased parry chance, effectively reducing a whole lot of the damage. What they are getting this expansion so far in Midnight has been something significantly improving their defenses, and as you might have seen already from multiple clips, streams, videos, also their damage, which is a follow-up extra goodie in terms of power-ups. But the biggest power at the moment starts from a combination of their Apex talents and their tier set, which is new. We haven't touched this on, as you know, the Season 1's tier set will be reasonably weak, reasonably poor, reasonably unexciting, but Blood has a pretty strong one. Same goes for the Apex talents. Not the first bit, which is trash, or rather just uninteresting and unimportant, empowering your next Earth Strike. You don't spam Earth Strike for the damage, you spam it as an enabler, a stack up buff enabler, so this is whatever. What makes this super good is that when you consume a rune, you have a chance to call a dancing rune weapon, number one. Number two, for each dancing rune weapon, you gain 6% more damage and 4% DR. So first, your rune weapon already spawns with 2 weapons up, so it's already 8% DR. But this is not that relevant. We are talking about a 90-second cooldown that lasts for 12 seconds, right? So it's like, is it really what makes you meta to have 8% damage reduction for 12 seconds every 90 seconds? No, the OP-ness comes from the proc rate, the extra dancing rune weapons you get from this Apex talent. And when we say proc rate, we do mean proc rate, because when you look at the proc rate, for example, of this dancing rune weapon throughout an entire key, it's a 61% uptime. Technically, you should have been able to use dancing rune weapon about 13-14 times in this key. You shouldn't have had nearly as much as this uptime. And that's because of the procs you're getting from the Apex talent. It's going to be your Dance of Midnight. Basically the extra proc of this weapons, you can see how high they go. Every one of these levels past 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 is 4% DR and 6% more damage. So this is 4, 8, 12, 16, it's 20% damage reduction for 6 seconds, which is how long the extra rune summoned lasts. So it's a lot of extra DR that gets spawned for free from those rune weapons. Now, what skyrockets this value of these Apex talents working around your dancing rune weapon is now your Gift of the Sun lane, since it now always procs during when you activate dancing rune weapon. Turns out, even if it is activated for free from your Apex talents, you still get the proc of Gift of the Sun lane. You still get the 200% effectiveness haste buff, for example, that you can get from Vampiric Strike. That's a 21% haste buff that you get. And when you look at, again, the uptime of this kind of buff throughout an entire key, the Essence of the Blood Queen, for starters, obviously, is like perma up. Like for the entire key, unless the tank is dying, it's just always at max 7 stacks. But more than that, you have the Gift of the Sun lane buff, which is now going to be obviously as up as Dancing Rune Weapon, which means that for basically more than half the key, you will get this haste buff. You will get 21% haste buff for almost 2/3 of a key. This gets doubled up by your current tier set, which is the second part especially. That strike dealing 8% increased damage, but more importantly, it has a 20% chance to give you a free charge of Blood Boil. That's the other part of DK doing well right now, which is their damage. DK damage right now is quite comparable to other DPS specs. You even see them popping up in top rankings amongst other DPS specs, and that's a lot to do with Blood Boil, right? You have, of course, the super value now of Dancing Rune Weapon because it spawns all the time, so they constantly do extra damage, and the sheer amount of damage your Blood Boil does now. So you have this combination in this new version, especially because of the synergy they have with Sun Lane. That's the thing, more so than, actually completely more so than Deathbringer. The fact that the rune weapons now spawn all over the place, which means constant procs of Gift of the Sun lane, it's a thing. The fact that as you spam Vampiric Strike, thanks to Transfusion, you increase the damage of Dancing Rune Weapon 20, 40, 60, 80% the more you spam this Vampiric Strike. And the fact that the procs themselves don't just give you DR, but also gives you damage increase. So having 2, 3, 4 active wounds is 18, 24% damage increase. And when we put these two together, they are a very powerful combo of both damage increase and damage reduction. This Apex talent right here is one of the few things that could make Blood DK a meta tank, for example, in a Mythic Plus season, because being able to get DR, as we said, is like the most important thing out of a Blood Death Knight in terms of their major weakness, and this is very, very good. You can be even more defensive at the cost of, at the moment, an enormous amount of damage by going Deathbringer, simply because Deathbringer can give you the 7.5% damage reduction at almost all times, basically. So you would be even tankier as Deathbringer, but right now you would be losing tons of damage by going away from Sun Lane. This is pretty much the reason why Blood DK is being played so much right now, why you have these, you know, somewhat sad pictures as you try to check, for example, a Blood DK tank, and you see logs from 19 to 15 keys, basically, across all of the 4 testable keys, and then you move on to something like Guardian, and Guardian is 15 to 14, 14 to 10, 12 to 10, 14 to 12. So that's the current value you have right now of Blood DK, both in terms of the damage they are doing, which is significantly higher than any other tank. Well, Vengeance is kind of close as well as the tankiness. They are all playing, you are all playing a Sun Lane right now because of this damage. But the very powerful tool isn't just the damage, it's also now the tankiness you get from the interaction of the many free procs of your Dancing Rune Weapon, coupled together with the damage reduction, the stacking damage reduction and damage increase you are gaining with this. You have gotten other positive tools overall as a Blood DK in the, actually from the War Within into this expansion as well. The fact that now Marrow Rend is essentially an afterthought button throughout an entire key. You will press it 2 or 3 times because Visceral Strength gives you bone charges with Blood Boil. And the fact that now, especially as Sun Lane, at least it feels good to be pressing Vampiric Strike. Vampiric Strike in and of itself would be a pretty boring button because, you know, having 418 casts and this one being your most casted ability when it does no damage, right? It's poor. It's not that good. But because of all of the things, as mentioned, that Vampiric Strike empowers, obviously it does give you the stacking haste buff, but as we have seen, once you get it to max stacks, it pretty much stays active until you die. So it's not that relevant. It's more relevant to use this. It makes you feel good for once that you're pressing a button that is very weak because you know you are using it to do damage elsewhere. So it still feels nice to use between that damage increase and the other source of damage for you, which is the Blood Boil. So you both have Vampiric Strike empowering your Dancing Rune weapon damage and your Blood Boil damage, which, as you've seen, are by far your 2 biggest sources of damage. So right now, Blood is doing very well, both in terms of damage done and in terms of tankiness, because the most important thing they lack isn't extra parry, extra self-healing, more HP, perhaps more utility or more damage on a tank. It's damage reduction. It's ways to survive. That's the only other times they have been meta was with higher than normal, higher than expected damage reduction tools, because eventually, as you keep scaling, the endlessly scaling Mythic Plus, the damage taken is just too much for you to deal with it by death striking and healing yourself back. It just wasn't quite ever enough until that one season when they got to get some more damage reduction in their toolkit, and that's what they have right now. This Apex talent is super good because it gives you that. Yeah, the extras of actually also giving you a ton of damage and making you comparable to a middle of the pack DPS right now obviously is going to be fixed. We're not pretending like this kind of damage will not be nerfed. It will, 100%, both in terms of likely the proc chance of Dance of Midnight, the proc chance of your extra rune weapons to lower also the uptime of Gift of the Sun Lane, if not flat out the damage of the rune weapons or the damage of Blood Boil, right? Having Blood Boil doing 140k per cast on average is a bit too much. Yeah, there's target squishing. You don't quite have an idea of how much this is right now in the War Within, but it's a lot. If you consider, for example, that the Blood DK himself had 96k DPS, and this was doing almost 50% more than your average DPS, which is a lot. It's like you right now doing 10 million AoE DPS and having a single ability averaging 50 million damage per cast. That's the equivalent of what you have right now in Blood Boil. So even then, it's perhaps a bit too overboard in terms of value, but that's not an issue, right? You know, thinking that the worst part of your class and spec right now is we do too much damage. It's easily solvable, easily fixable. You just lower the damage numbers. So what is valuable is that right now the base level of your spec is doing very well, which is what Blood is doing right now. And that's why we went through this video, just to highlight why would you be seeing, if you check out streams, videos, footage of the beta, Blood more often than not. These are the reasons why. How well it is doing. They haven't really lost much of anything else. They still have Anti-Magic Zone, Anti-Magic Shell, Icebound Fortitude, Vampiric Blood, Dancing Weapon, of course. Their abilities have remained there, their grips, AoE grip, right, is still there. It's just that the combination of their tier set, more resets, more uses of Blood Boil, the Apex talent, constant procs of your rune weapon, which puts you constantly into your Gift of the Sun Lane, constantly gives you 21% haste to speed you up, speed your GCD. And the more weapons you have out, the more stacking damage increase and damage reduction increase you get, is what is making Blood right now the best tank and in pole position for being one of the meta tanks in the next expansion, purely out of these systems. Not because of the damage they are doing, not because of how cool they're looking now, it's because of their finally something extra in terms of damage reduction that blood can get. So that is what we can see right now for today on this Monday in the state of the currently best looking tank we have in the beta. But with this said and explained with, we can now leave each other. We can start our goodbyes by thanking everyone for having watched the video, together with, of course, everyone else who's been supporting Competitive for free, by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, man, getting called 3 times by the bank for a meeting, and then you get there, and it's a 3-minute questionnaire. Thank you. Goodbye.